And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. And I'm delighted to have a fearless campaigner who I've followed back in the day in 2018, whenever she put up that infamous poster up at the Labour Party conference. But there's a lot to follow from that. And that is Kellie-Jay Keen. Kellie-Jay, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Great to have you. And your handle there is the Posie Parker, which is also Posie Parker, name that many of you will be familiar on social media. Now there are lots. Maybe if we can go back a little bit. Obviously, you have behind you adult human female or adult human male. We can depend which side you cover up. So go with either. But I just want to bring up the poster. Maybe maybe our US audience may be less familiar. The UK audience, I think, will be very familiar with your work on standing up for women, especially in the onslaught of the trans lobby that we have faced over the last many years. But here's the BBC article: "Women billboard removed after transphobia row," and that's women, adult human female. Maybe give us a little bit of your background before, and then we'll get on to what made you want to put up a billboard like that outside the Labour Party conference. But kind of give us a little bit of your background up until that point.
Well, I was a stay-at-home mother of 4 children, and that's kind of my background. Went to uni, started work, met my husband, and then once I had my first baby, I never went back to work, and I was just quite happy until about 2015 when I found that I might have heard about 2014, but 2015, the Conservatives got elected. I was on the left. I had no idea that was going to happen. That we were going to outright elect a Conservative Party government. We did. I joined on online forums, and then I found this particular topic of pretending men can be women, and that you weren't allowed to talk about it. So as soon as that happened, I was then I was really switched on to it. It was a bit kind of, "That's not happening. That can't happen. I won't let it happen." And I guess I sort of accidentally became an activist.
To put up a billboard like that takes takes a lot of guts, and obviously you have that. Obviously takes planning. Uh, I guess if you put up kind of billboards, you go to one of the companies and you say, I want to put 100 or 200 or 1,000 or whatever. You stuck up one on a specific spot. What led you to thinking this is a good idea?
So I think I just thought, look, most people don't know what's going on. So as soon as they find out what's going on, then they'll all say, "Well, that's ridiculous. Let's just put an end to it right now." Like I was quite naive. Um, And so I looked at so my first job out of uni, I was involved in media and marketing, and I didn't stay in it for very long because I met my husband and we had babies within like about 3 years. So um, I just thought, oh, let's have a look at the Times. Let's have a look at like a middle play, like a double page spread or something in the Times, big advert, and it was sort of 20 to 40,000, and I thought, well, I don't have that. And then I found out and then I looked at buses, that was also really expensive. And then I found out that a billboard, a paper billboard, was, £900, like, including VAT, it was £900, and I thought, "Well, I can do that if I sell T-shirts and, merch," and I thought, "Well, the word woman is the thing, right? So it's what's being erased?" Well, if you take the word woman, if you erase it, dilute it, and it ceases to mean what we all know it to mean, which is adult human female, then we'll become unstuck. We'll become untethered from the reality of what living like being a woman is. And so that was what it was going to be. And then I've got a bit of an instinct for marketing, I think. So I knew that if you I wanted it to be black and white because I wanted it to be very simple. I also thought it was gonna be cheaper if it was black and white, to be honest, so that was like a I don't think it would have been. Um, but it used to be that if you just did a black and white advert, they were a lot cheaper than a color one. So I realized that if you did white with black, it wasn't half as impactful as black background with white writing. And then I had to find the phonetic kind of way of spelling the word woman. So that led me to just searching through online dictionary definitions to find one with the phonetic woman. And I found the Google one. And so I think a lot of dictionaries at the time would have said adult female person or adult female human. And the one I could use was adult human female. And so then that became the rallying cry. So I put it up. After about a week, they complained and they took it down. And it became a story.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
Tell us about, because the headline, the BBC headline, of course, transphobia row. You'd groups saying you were part of some hate group. How? I mean, what was going through your mind? Because you're thinking you're just putting up the bleeding obvious. You're just stating what is common sense. How is this hateful? Just explaining what a woman is.
Well, to be honest, that was, I mean, one of the reasons of putting it up was to get the backlash from the trans activists and the idiots. That was part and parcel of the whole thing. We knew that they would make a fuss. That's why you just need one, because you've got social media. So one, you might as well have 100 of them across the country if you've got one, and it goes online and they start complaining about it. But for a week, like nobody was saying anything. I was like, oh my goodness. It's going to be it's wasted money, and it was somewhere that you wouldn't have seen the billboard. And then really luckily Primeside, who was the owner of the billboard space, they actually put a tweet up celebrating like small and medium enterprises and them using their sort of outdoor advertising space. And then the activist retweeted and started writing to board members and so on. So they really did my work for me, which is kind of how the last 7 years have been.
Tell me, maybe the first thing, it was us at Labour Party conference, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, political response. Let's maybe look at that, and then we'll talk about all your kind of personal experiences standing up for this common sense issue of what gender really means. But what was the response from Labour? You said you're Tricia on the left. The Conservatives have traditionally, supposedly, would have stood up for against the nonsense of the trans movement, but they've been for over 14 years. They were complicit in bringing in this nonsense. Was a plague on both houses. But what were there different responses from different political groups?
Well, I asked Maria Miller, who was a minister for women and equalities. I asked her what was a woman at a Conservative women's lunch to celebrate 100 years of Conservative women, and she was too frightened to answer. In fact, she gave a terrible answer, and the Conservatives wanted to bring through self-ID. But the Labour groups and Labour members, I mean, I was only in the left-wing groups, but I got kicked out of all of them. I used to ask a question, does my 11-year-old daughter have the right to use a female-only changing room and not see an adult penis? Now, for me, that's a easy question. That's a gotcha question. That's a ha. Well, they're not women, then are they? But actually, I was told that my daughter was transphobic and I was a pervert, and why were we staring at genitals? And I think the Conservatives just didn't want to know anything about it. They were just quite happy to talk about like silly things like trans rights, which for me, when I hear somebody talk about trans rights, I hear someone wanting to sterilize children and put men and women spaces.
Tell me a little bit about what the what the activism has been. Some of the things you've learned. I mean, I've talked to I had Chloe Cole on the other week, and I mean, such a brave individual, but fascinating hearing what she has gone through and how she speaks up so boldly. Talked to Jeff Younger about his child in California, and you begin to hear some of the personal stories, and they're heartbreaking. But then there's also the overall story that you're trying to put out to catch as many people and persuade as many people of what's right and wrong. But tell us a little bit about that, those 7 years of your activism journey, and some of the things you've learned, some of the surprises on the way.
I've learned that um, I've learned that women on the left and women who call themselves feminists are probably amongst the most awful women that I've ever encountered, and I don't think I knew that. But ironically, their behavior is stereotypically kind of female toxic behavior. So if you think about the worst of all women, that's them. So I've learned that. I've learned that envy is incredibly powerful. And I've learned that the police um, consistently blame women for speaking up as opposed to the people that speak against us. I mean, I've had the full range. Some of the things I can't talk about, I won't be able to talk about for many, many years that have happened to myself and my family. And there'll be complicated reasons for that. There are some campaigns of harassment that have lasted for sort of 8 years um, that still aren't sorted. There have been personal costs that, again, I can't I can't talk about. I thought I was going to lose my life in New Zealand, and that was when I did an event in Auckland, and there were thousands upon thousands. I think there were a couple of thousand. I mean, some people say three, some people say two. I haven't counted, but there was a very large mob, and the police failed to show up until I was right on the edge of that. And I found out one thing. I found out that when you're in danger, that the thing you do is the only things that you can do. So the only things I could do was put one foot in front of the other, and that becomes really important, and that's something that you really focus on, and I guess we all kind of know from other people's accounts that that's what happens, but it's amazing, like, you can't even really hear people, or you might hear an individual voice from sort of 20 people away, but you don't necessarily hear the whole voice. Um, so yeah, I mean, I I sometimes think about everything that's happened to me, and it is quite extraordinary that basically I was just a woman who started selling stickers and T-shirts um, in 2018 and tweeted a bit, and has ended up probably being banned more than anybody else that I know of. Um, and I've been interviewed 3 times by the police. I've been arrested once. I had the police at my door for being untoward about paedophiles. You know, I'm just an ordinary woman, and I think what we've seen over the last, especially with immigration or migration, whatever we want to call it, what we've seen is actually the police are quite happy to go against ordinary citizens with genuine concerns. The police are quite happy to control or try to control us because we're quite law-abiding people. We just get to a point where we're like, up with this, I will not put. But I mean, if you're a terrible person, you can get away with loads of things.
No, yeah. Well, I think we found out the police, their role used to be, we grew up thinking the police were there to enforce the law, right and wrong, but really it's there just to keep the peace and whatever that means. And obviously they see or have seen at a number of events, they've seen you as the problem, despite the fact that you're not saying anything wrong, and therefore they have to remove you. I
Mm.
think we see that in many situations. If something the media tell us is controversial, then the person who is part of some part of that controversy, they must be removed. And you probably find that a number of times.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have. It's very odd. I mean, we work with the police, and we have a woman called Iris who is brilliant with the police, and then I'll have a sort of a charming chat with them. And I don't look, I really respected the police. I think I still respect many officers. I think a lot of people join the police, or certainly did a long time ago. Um But they joined the police because they genuinely believed in the rule of law and they wanted to make this country a better place, and they felt that joining the police was a way to do it. Clearly, in all large organizations, you have some awful people. Um, but something's happened to the police force where it's like I'd rather be frightened of the police and them occasionally get it wrong than people not being frightened of the police. Like there's just there's something that's happened. I don't know what it is. I don't know when it happened, but it must have been a tipping point where we went from, some police were terrible, a bit Gene Huntish, I'm sure. Um, but now they've got no teeth. Like they don't seem to be able to do it. Like accompanying, you saw it in Epping, but we've had it many times where the police are escorting the TRAs who sort of talk about punching us. They escort these people to us. And I don't even get it. This kind of right to protest. Well, that should that include the right to be escorted by the police?
And we found that there isn't much pushback. I think a lot of people maybe question the police, certainly during the COVID tyranny, and what they meted out to individuals who were law-abiding citizens. But I, I think we've realised there's little you can push back. If the police have decided something, then you go to the courts, and the courts aren't necessarily on your side because a lot of politicized judges. So I think, yeah, people kind of somehow throw their arms up and think, um, either I've changed or the police changed because I grew up trusting them and now I don't trust them at all.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've encountered so many really decent, authoritative police officers that I really do trust, and they have on occasion, they've really looked after me. Um, but I wonder whether they would if I wasn't kind of quite well known, have a certain sort of following, and I don't mean I'm well known out like most people, I walk down the street, they have no idea who I am at all, but if you know, you know. And I have a big enough following that if something happened to me, somebody's gonna be embarrassed. There's gonna be some sort of pushback, and also I personally would push back. So, um, but, still some pretty brilliant police officers. I just think they are policing this country with 2 hands tied behind their backs, and I don't think it's sometimes it is the occasional officer, if you've got an officer who comes to work dressed as a woman and he's a man, then the whole force is screwed because nobody can you can never again talk about that kind of the 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 fetish of it or however you want to talk about that it's a danger in policing. You can't do that anymore when that person's in the force.
Want to get your thoughts on the media because I remember was it New Zealand where they said that you had some Nazi supporters at your rally, and you look into it and you think, wow, how low can you go to come up with a story which is just not true,
Yeah.
but literally is about a narrative that you want to push? What have been your experiences of the media in terms of actually supporting you or trying to demonize you?
Well, the Daily Mail in the UK has always been pretty nice. The Daily Mail in Australia was terrible, terrible, terrible. Named my family, like my kids, was awful. The Times has always been all right. I mean, there's been a concerted effort to ignore me, and favor the more I wouldn't call them moderate, I would call them compromising, the compromisers, in this side of the debate. So the press might prefer those. Janice Turner, she doesn't like me. Like, there's a lot of people that don't like me, which is fine. The worst, I think, was New Zealand, where I was I was talking on a live stream and I was messing with, like, say it was my I was messing with my zip, and I did that, and they blurred out my hand and then put the story out that I was doing whatever that 4chan thing is. Is it
Oh,
white
yes.
white
Yeah.
power or Nazi or something? I don't know. But they said that I was doing that, and that was before I'd arrived in New Zealand. I mean, that was nuts. To be to be a woman clearly who just started doing these t-shirts because I didn't like what was going on, and then things grow, and then sometimes I just pause and I'm like, whole of a media in another country is saying these things about me, is making up stuff about me as if I'm important. Like, why do you make up stuff about someone who's unimportant? You just don't bother covering them. But there was a High Court injunction to try and stop me getting into New Zealand. Like, I can't get a visa to Australia anymore or Canada. Like, for what? I've never committed a crime. I've never been caught. No, but I've never committed a crime. And I'm a pretty decent citizen. And my kids have never committed a crime and my husband hasn't. I don't come from a bad family. And yet, just for saying what we all know to be true, I am literally banned from countries.
What is it like having someone like J.K. Rowling standing up for this issue? You kind of, I guess there are points of this you end up scratching your head and you're thinking, seriously, has that happened?
Well, I I'm really, really grateful. I think she's amazing. I think this fight is all the better for her in it. But I'm not gonna lie, in 2015, 2016, 2017, I was genuinely thinking, "Where are the women with big platforms?" So, we're all very grateful that J.K. Rowling, joined the fight, but, um, there are so many other women that haven't. I think I'm probably more scratching my head at why are the rest so silent? What a bunch of cowards.
Have you had people come to you silently? Because I know in different areas, I've worked with Lord Pearson for like over 10 years, and he very vocal on Islam and women being treated in Islam and looking at the grooming gangs and turning a blind eye. And he often is people in the chamber who will come to him and say, "Well done. Thank you for saying that. I couldn't possibly say that." And just utter cowardice. What's it been like for you? Have you had people in maybe positions in media or politics come to you to say well done, but they're just afraid to speak themselves?
I think we get that all the time, but I'm not really networking or seeking to network with those people. Um, I've I've really made it my business to try and stretch the Overton window and to encourage other women to speak up about all aspects of their lives. You know, I it and It's not necessarily out of the most compassionate thing. It just annoys me that people have things going on in their lives and then they don't deal with it, talk about it, say it. And so what I hope Let Women Speak does is genuinely create the spaces in which women can speak. So I think early on I probably had a few emails or people say thank you, but I'm not seeking to sit at nice tables with women with comfortable shoes. That's not really been what I've done. And so I don't know. They don't contact me. Perhaps I'm just not that approachable to those people.
Let let women speak. What people going to it, they can obviously buy some merchandise, they can sign up. What why should people become part of that? What role does the individual play? Because sometimes I think individuals, we can think this is just too big an issue. It's gone too far. We just have to accept the status quo if this is so crap. But actually, being part of Let Women Speak in other organizations mean they can play their part. Let the kind of audience know why they should be part of that.
Well, look, we started genuine grassroots. So we started off meeting at Speaker's Corner, and then I realized that the women all over the country couldn't get there. So we started going elsewhere. And the format is really genuine and it hasn't changed, which is why it works. And that is you come along, nobody cares about your politics. I mean, I'd rather people didn't come along with like banners about what their politics are, because I think that takes away from the whole nature of the whole thing. Like when October the 7th happened, I just thought, no, I'm not gonna let that wreck it, and I think it would change it for me if somebody came up with a Gaza, Palestine thing. I think I would find personally, that would really stretch my patience on whether or not I felt and I did just say then that no political symbols, just none. Don't come with signs of division, only come with an intention to unify. Um, so they come along, these women, and I just ask anyone who doesn't know what Let Women Speak is about, just watch an episode of it. Just watch one of the meetings because we'll get someone, it can be something really pedestrian, like a woman in her early 60s goes to Aquafit and she's probably had kids and maybe she's got grandchildren, but it's the first thing she's done for herself. And it's the only exercise she's getting as she's sort of in that age bracket. And then she can't go anymore because there's a man in the changing room. There's a man going to the women only Aquafit. And so what happens when we do Let Women Speak is there's enough ordinary women just like her where she feels she can raise her voice. And then when she raises her voice and she speaks on the microphone or just speaks, she will tell a story in her words that reach someone that I can't reach, no matter how many things I say and how many stories I tell. She will absolutely 100%. There will be someone listening that before didn't feel they could speak up or felt totally alone. And after, they don't. Like, we genuinely liberate women from isolation. And so the only way I can do that is if I can travel to do it. I give up quite a lot of my time. I do this full time. Um, I'm sure my husband thinks I probably should get a job, but I've been doing it full time since about 2018. And I think about 3 or 4 years, I was still thinking it was a bit of a hobby. And I was just passionate about it. And then I had a friend who said, "Well, you do it full time, don't you?" I was like, "Yeah, no, no, I think it's a little bit more than a hobby." And I know that what I've done has had an impact. I frequently meet people who say that something they heard at Let Women Speak, might have stopped their daughter from thinking that she was non-binary or a boy. So we definitely do make a difference, but we can't do it on thin air. And our opponents are well funded and well connected and embedded in our institutions and civil service and everywhere where they shouldn't be. So yeah, give us your money.
Well, let me bring that's the front page of the site, and people can go and see what events are happening. The store they can join, they can donate, but it's they want to join £5 or £10 a month, and I think that's key. I think sometimes the danger is people consume information they agree with, but don't necessarily want to pay the price of a coffee to do that. So I think it's vital that people support you. And is that maybe the best way that people can support the work you do by joining?
Well, actually, well, yeah, they can. That's phenomenal. That's brilliant. But I sell merchandise with messages, so it might be stickers or T-shirts or beer mats, Fella Artois. Um, or not Miguel. So we sell all types of things, and that does a number of things. Like, I think we're quite unique in this. And that's most of my funding. The most, like, my trip, the film I made in America, the trip around Australia and New Zealand, all those things were funded by merchandise sales, and that does a couple of things. Number one, if you don't feel that you can start conversations, then your T-shirt will do it for you, and it will start conversations. And you then feel that you are not strangled by silence, which I think happens when we know, when you're at that dinner party and everyone's saying something, you're like, "Oh my God, they're all wrong. They're all wrong, and they're all repeating the same lies from the same kind of source." Well, it can almost feel like there's something pressing on your throat. And so that's what the merchandise does. And then what with that merchandise, not only do you get to say something, but other people get to read it. You might actually find someone who doesn't know about it, who then now knows about it, or you might find someone who does, but also feels isolated wherever they live. So then they're like, "Oh, there's someone else that knows the truth about this and isn't afraid to say it." And then the other thing you do is you support an organization who plows every penny back in to ensuring that more conversations are created and more women feel that they are not isolated by silence. So I think we have a really good business model. And it's done well so far. But yeah, merchandise is a double whammy, triple, quadruple whammy.
How do you, because it's about let women speak, but uh, with men watching with fathers, half men watching who are fathers will have girls, maybe half will not, and there's always a concern of what happens to your child, the impact, the messaging that they hear, especially on social media. How, if their father's watching, they've got girls, they're concerned of the messaging that their daughters are receiving. How do they connect in with what you're doing?
Well, look, men are more than welcome, and I don't use silly words like ally, but men are welcome. It's their fight too. But just what happens in many, many fights when women and men are involved, and this is predominantly women's fault because women will defer. And I just don't want to do that. And I feel that women have enough to say, and it's an existential threat to our own language and our own existence, right? So that's why um that's why I've made it let women speak. Now, there is something that men can do, and it's something that I think men should do, and if they haven't been doing it already, then they need to as of like now. Please don't leave it to their wives or the mothers of their children to have those conversations in schools. And I'm a pretty forthright woman. I speak in short sentences, like as short as possible, and I don't use sort of flowery language. Like if I'm saying something to you, you'll pretty much know exactly what I mean. And even I have had trouble getting things done at school where my children are concerned. Um, Not necessarily on this issue, because on this issue, I'm really happy to make adults feel uncomfortable, who are looking after children when they are threatening safeguarding. Um, but I would say to men, you go and ask for a meeting with the head teacher and ask to see the resources and the bullying policy and the PSHE and ask that teacher and look them straight in the face and ask them if they think non-binary is a thing. Um, and and don't let up and never be frightened to leave silences. I think that is a really good tactic in communication when you want someone to tell on themselves is you just leave enough silence. So you need to be the ones to do that. You need to be the ones to talk about the safety of your mother or auntie or grandmother who maybe is in a residential home or needs counsel care in her own home. You need to be having those conversations because I think that something happens when men speak, and we'd all love this to be not true, but it's true. And that is, it is listened to in far more kind of serious ways than when women speak. So it's kind of men's duty, really, to have those quite powerful, quiet conversations in which you're trying to protect the women in your family.
Yeah, don't leave it up to the school. That's the most foolish thing to do. Me, give us a little bit of snapshot of where we are in the UK. We've heard a lot about for the Tavistock Clinic being shut down, but seems to be restarted. We have schools. Some schools are horrendous in what they teach. Others are maybe more common sense. Um, where kind of are we in the UK in actually protecting women and protecting their spaces at the moment?
Where are we? Well, we're in a place where the law has been clarified. It didn't need clarifying. The law hasn't changed at all. Where there was a Supreme Court ruling where they said, well, a woman is an adult human female in the Equality Act. Well, that was true the day before also that they said that. And that was true from 2010 when they said that.
Well,
Um,
it was I mean, Keir Starmer, he didn't I mean, that on that day, he then came out and announced, so he didn't know what it was until that ruling. So, a bit
exactly.
confusing.
And we're still in a position as well post the Supreme Court where lots of people are not going along with the Supreme Court ruling. And so we have an EHRC. We spend 17 to 18 million pounds a year on that, which is Equality and Human Rights Commission, and they are the regulator for our Equality Act 2010. The Equality Act has protected characteristics in it. It's an absolutely atrocious bit of legislation. It doesn't really help anyone. Everyone's got competing rights. So it's religion and beliefs, and that's the freedom from religion and the freedom for religion. Protected characteristics like we now have one called gender critical, which is a belief that biology matters. Um, Then disability rights, which I think is a really important section of rights that deserves its own act. I don't think we need to have that. And anyway, an abomination called gender identity or gender reassignment, which they used a very vague term of gender reassignment, and now in the guidance that will stretch out to kind of anyone who's ever thought one day of having a blue fringe. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the EHRC, as I said, 18 up to 18 million pounds a year budget, and they've only ever intervened either half-hearted or against women. So they didn't know the Equality Act and what the legal position of women were in the Equality Act. So now you're still having women post this clarification having to raise tens of thousands of pounds to go and take whatever organisation to court. I personally complained to someone called Bristol Women's Voice saying that they were against the Equality Act for including men who call themselves women and saying that it's a women's organisation, and they've just come back with a kind of, "What are you gonna do about it?"
Have you thought on parts of this journey that this must be a quick battle? This will be over in a couple of months when people see the stupidity of it, and when you call out the nonsense. This has to be an easy win, and yet years later, you're still needed more than ever. Your voice is still as prevalent because this battle is still in full flow,
Yeah.
despite some wins.
100%. And I tell you what makes it very frightening. The people that are so there are organizations, there's a broad spectrum of organizations, but the ones that have kind of got their feet under the table a little bit, they are much more compromising than I am. Like I said a long time ago, I want to be able to discriminate against a man dressing up in a fetish in a school. I want him to lose his job. I want it to be a thing that you have to leave your sexual desires and fantasies at home when you're teaching children. The same in a hospital, the same in, right throughout the NHS, and in any place of work, actually. I don't think any woman should have to go to work and be subjected to a man coming in woman face. It's disgusting. We wouldn't allow that if it was blackface. It wouldn't be okay if, like, Derek down working at Tesco's could turn up in blackface because he really felt he was from Africa. We just wouldn't put up with that nonsense. And so there is a little bit of a fear that we will settle on a win that isn't what I would consider a win, and we'll be in the same position in like 20 years' time or 10 years' time or whatever. So um, I think I have to continue to keep pushing the culture into a recognition of what's really going on when a man puts a dress on. And it's not that he genuinely believes in his heart of hearts and in his noble soul that he's female. As I think we've seen a lot in the Sandy Peggy case, that doctor is typical. He saw a woman that wanted to say no. So, just to preface everyone who's watching in the United States or anywhere else, a doctor decided, a rugby playing doctor who now calls himself Beth. He was working in a hospital in Fife, and for some unknown reason, he decided he wanted to change in the nurse's female changing room. So there's no reason for him to be in there at all, not because he's a doctor, but also because he's a bloke, a man. And I think he clocked with that woman that she wasn't going to go along with it. She wasn't playing along. And he wanted to make her life a misery. And I think that's been happening in a lot of workplaces. And everyone's frightened of them because they have a protected characteristic of gender reassignment under the Equality Act. And the only workers that have any rights in this country apparently are those who have these protected characteristics because the Equality Act is often engaged in employment tribunals. So, it's these men are abusive men that abuse their wives in their own home with something what we would call coercive control, and that is a gradual infringements and erosion of boundaries until that woman doesn't even bloody know what day of the week it is.
Yeah. Can I want to just kind of finish off on the trans lobby, and the aggressiveness and militant and hate I think that you see coming out of them, and the lack of rationale and et cetera, et cetera. Let's know what that's been like for you? Because I think often we think you can reason with someone, you can begin to explain, but then if someone is screaming in your face, then you realize actually something's gone wrong up here and there's no amount of common sense. What has that been? How kind of have you observed the trans lobby and how far they will go to get their awful message out?
Well, that look, they're entitled kids, most of them, and they've just been given the keys to the castle without doing a day's work to deserve them. So I don't I look, you bad people have always existed. Um and entitled people have always existed, and unwell people have always existed, and fetishists and so on. I mean, I just don't think you can rationalize with those people. And what would be the point? What would be the point in laboring for like 3 hours with a conversation where they've just decided before you even start that you're a Nazi? Um, so I've never thought my job was to convince those people that they're wrong. I think my job has always been to convince everybody else that there is an issue and they need to be aware of it. So that's what my activism has always been about. I did a guerrilla lighting. We lit up the Royal Opera House and the BBC building with the dictionary definition. These Let Women Speak often uh, draw quite a lot of attention from the other side, which is always brilliant for me because they're idiots. So they come out and they shout and they're aggressive and they've got violent signs, and half of them have got walking sticks where they've been taking cross-sex hormones. And I think people look across and that, oh, here's the two sides: middle-aged women and a group of entitled, shouty kids.
Sorry, I said I want to end off now. I want to end off on this. In terms of pushing and trying to change the argument here, trying to win people over, and then you've got the political win of Trump stateside. Is that kind of the cavalry coming to help? Because I've been blown away by how he's talked about going after some of the doctors who participated in the mutilation of children. And that shows a full on. It's not just, no, that's wrong. It's we're going to go after the people who push this.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that the cavalry coming to help us?
Well, I don't know, because all the way through his executive order were the ideas coming from this side of the Atlantic. I mean, in particular, he uses adult human female. Like, I don't think that's a coincidence that this was, our rallying cry. So I think we definitely um, gave a perspective. Like, we're called Turf Island over here because of our arguments, and the American women had not been listened to at all. I think it was the American right that helped do much of this work. But yeah, no, I don't know if they're coming to help us. I think we've been pretty good at helping ourselves, but without our Trump, I don't know who would be so charismatic and courageous as to do what he's done.
And in case people don't know the term turf, tell us what that is.
So it comes from trans exclusionary radical feminists, but I don't recognize trans as a thing. I don't think it's a thing. I think I say nowadays it's not an identity, it's a set of behaviors. When someone says I'm trans, they're telling you about their behavior, and most of them are not good. And I'm certainly not a radical feminist. I might be relatively radical, but I'm definitely not a feminist.
Kellie-Jay, I really appreciate you coming on. I've admired your work for years, and it's good to have you on finally and talk to you and get a little bit of an understanding and certainly educate, I think, especially the US audience of what's happening here. So thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.